So we have made it to my local pond here in Jenkins, and I was gonna set up the camera and all my equipment outside and give you like a scenic view for the intro, but there are some guys out here using leaf blowers and that would kind of just ruin the whole thing and you wouldn't be able to hear me, so we're just gonna do it in my car. The intro shouldn't be too long anyway, so just bear with me. They're just blowing the leaves into my fishing area, so that's good. Over the past few weeks, we have had record temperatures here, and it's really taken a toll on the fishing. Just when I think they're out deep, they're up shallow. Just when I think they're up shallow, they're back out deep. And I really don't know what to do. I don't think I've ever been skunked this many times in a row, ever. It's just, the fishing is extremely tough. And I know that on top of the fact that we're at one of the tough ponds to fish, doesn't really sound like it's going to be a really good video, but you guys just stay tuned because there's a little bit of a different idea for this video that we'll talk about here shortly. So before we do get into the video, I'm going to let you guys know that the comment of the day from now on, I probably won't be announcing the name because I filmed these videos so far in advance that I don't know what the comment of the day is going to be because the previous video hasn't even been uploaded yet. And then once I get everything ready and edited and together, I have to go back and insert a clip of me saying who the comment of the day is. So from now on, the comment of the day is just going to pop up somewhere like that. And I really wanted to announce it because it makes me feel like I'm a little bit more on a personal level with you guys, but it just makes it a lot easier if I can just throw it up. So I do apologize for that, but I'm still just as thankful for every person that watches and every person that comments. So thank you guys so much for all your support. But that's the comment of the day. Today's video, like I said, it's going to be a little bit different. So hopefully I can still catch some fish. But the main purpose of this video is going to be to kind of explain to you guys what I usually do during this time of the year and how I still manage to bring in a few fish usually. This year being the exception, apparently, because the weather just doesn't know what to do and it's messing everything up. But I'm going to go over a few baits and a few techniques that I like to use with those baits in order to still pull some of these really lethargic and finicky fish out. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get rigged up and I'm going to tie all these baits on. Then I'm going to get out there and start fishing. And while I'm fishing with them, I'll explain the techniques that I like to use and why I like to use these certain baits and where I like to throw them and just everything that helps me catch more fish in the winter. And even if we don't catch any fish today, hopefully these tips help you guys catch more fish when this water temperature starts to cool off and the fish become a lot more lethargic. But anyway, go ahead and if you do enjoy this type of content, hit the like button, help me out. But I'm gonna get rigged up and then I'll see you guys out on the water. Stay tuned. So the first bait that we're going to get into today is a crankbait. I really enjoy throwing these in the winter, especially the crawfish pattern, because when this water starts to get a little bit more cool, that's exactly how you need to start out the video right there. But when the water starts to cool down, the crawfish become more active. So the thing about using a crankbait in the winter or when the water drastically cools down is you want to make sure that you slow it down, and you also want to make sure that it's actually making contact with the bottom, because if it's not, it kind of imitates a bait fish. But if it is making contact with the bottom, it does a better job. Hold on. Blow her up. As I was saying, as long as you come in contact with the bottom, it'll imitate a crawfish a lot better. And that's really what you want to do, is just fish the bottom and slow roll it in. You are going to get a lot of this, you know, catch a lot of grass and a lot of leaves and all that, but it's still a very good technique to use. The crawfish are a lot more active when the water starts to cool down, but that doesn't mean that they're just zipping back and forth. They are still moving pretty slow as well, and that's why you just want to slowly creep it across the bottom and, you know, beat up against the rocks and the wood. And a lot of times that will get you a reaction strike from a bass that may be sitting and waiting on some of these crawfish to come by. And another thing is, I tend to prefer getting a deeper diving crankbait even when I'm fishing shallower water. That way it can get down to the bottom a lot faster, and you'll have that bait in the strike zone a lot longer. Okay, so I've fished with the crankbait for a little bit, and now I want to move on to the second bait. And since we're kind of on the subject of crawfish, I wanted to go ahead and pick this bait to talk about, and that would be a jig. Now, a jig in the winter is basically the same as what I was saying with the crankbait. The crawfish are more active, so they're out, and you know, it's just a really popular forage for the bass during that time. So I really like to throw a jig around, you know, riprap and trees and standing timber, anything pretty much that I know a crawfish would be around, I'll throw a jig. Now, you want to fish this just like I was saying with the crankbait, really slow. A lot of people actually downsize and they'll use a finesse jig, but I actually like to keep my jigs that bigger profile even through the winter, because a bass will still eat a good sized meal during the winter. They just don't want to chase it down. So if you pull a big jig in front of a bass's mouth, he's going to go after that just as much as he would go after a finesse jig. So basically what I like to do is just throw it out there, let it sink all the way to the bottom, and kind of just drag it along the bottom, giving it a few small pops to come over some rocks or whatever. But don't just, you know, burn it in. Kind of work it like you think a crawfish would be going across the bottom. Just try to imitate that the best that you possibly can. And also, even though I didn't mention it, try to match the color of the crawfish to the best of your ability. The crawfish in this pond are really, really dark brown, and sometimes they're more of a green color. So I went with a dark brown jig with a green pumpkin crack and crawl on the back. As I was saying, try to match the hatch. This does really well for matching the crawfish that are in this pond. If I see one, I'll try to catch it and show you. But also, there are many different types of jigs. I really like throwing a football jig in this pond especially, because you have rocks like that. I don't know if you can, yeah, you can see that. There's big rocks, and out there, that's what they look like, just stacked on top of each other. And with anything smaller than a football head, I kind of get stuck in those crevices really easy. So I like throwing, that's another reason I like sticking to a bigger profile, but I really like throwing a football head jig in this pond specifically. There's a few ponds that I'll prefer like a flipping jig or a swim jig even, and work a swim jig along the bottom like a normal flipping jig. That's one of the things I like most about the jig. They're so versatile. You can use them pretty much any way you want. And a jig is just one of those baits that you can use all year round and catch fish. But just dragging it along the bottom and giving it a little hops and letting it set is honestly where you're gonna get those bites, letting it sit. They'll come up and inspect it, and then usually you'll pop it around some rocks and they'll be watching it and following it. And then when you stop, a lot of times that jig trailer and the skirt is kind of just pulsing in the water, and that's when they'll hit it. Okay, so the next bait that we're going to be talking about is the jerk bait. Now the jerk bait, for many reasons, is a go-to and one of many anglers' favorites to use in the late fall and early winter. And the reason for that is through the fall, bass are chasing bait fish up into the shallows. And then once it starts to transition from fall to winter, those bait fish start dying off and the water's just too cold for them. And when that starts happening, if you ever get a chance to see that, the bait fish will kind of get bursts of energy and flutter and then kind of just float. And then they'll flutter and then float. Usually on the float is when a bass will, just suck them up. So a jerk bait actually does a near perfect job of imitating a dying bait fish. And that's why most people prefer to throw a jerk bait around this time of year, because you can throw it in like schools of shad or bait fish, and a bass is gonna want to go to the one that's dying because it's easier to catch. So the main way I'm gonna be fishing a jerk bait when it starts getting cold is I'll make long casts and I'll reel it really slow for a second just to get it down a little bit, and then pop it twice and then just let it sit. The colder the water gets, the longer you want your pauses. And I don't really like to give it more than like 3 jerks when it's really cold, because like I said, everything is moving slower in the winter, not just the bass. So you want it to look as real as possible. So I'll tend to go from, giving it 2 pops, letting it set for like 6 to 10 seconds, giving it 3 pops, letting it set, and just keep doing that. Okay, so now for the final and probably one of the most used baits for the winter is gonna be your shaky head. Or you can use other finesse style of worms, or just this style is what I'm talking about. The shaky head, I mean, it just works. There's not really much that I could probably tell you that you don't already know about a shaky head. But pretty much what I like to do is I'll cast it out, let it sink all the way to the bottom, of course, and then just drag it, like slowly drag it. And this is one of the most boring out of the 4, but one of the most effective also. It just flat out catches fish. And just like the jig, you can use this year round, but it really excels in the winter over other baits because of the small profile and basically how slow you can fish it. With a shaky head, you want to throw it on some light gear. So I have this on a 6.6 medium fast Lose Xfinity, and I think it's 8-pound fluorocarbon, I think, and that really just seems to work for me. I know a lot of people that go all the way down to like 4 and 6 pound test just because the fish are that finicky. I have a habit of breaking off on anything if I use something under 8. So, and I find that usually 8 is small enough to where the finicky fish will still bite, but big enough to hold up when I actually do catch one. So I stick with that. It's what works for me. You can play around with the gear that you're using to throw these baits. It doesn't have to be anything specific. Those are the 4 baits and techniques that I prefer to use during the winter. Now I will use other things, like I said. These are just my 4 main go-tos. So I'm basically gonna keep alternating between these and trying to catch a fish now, and hopefully I can, but if not, then it won't be a lack of trying. Oh, I have one. Oh, he got off. Or he's small. He's small. Well, that is not the right species. And we hooked him in the side, but I think we hooked him in the mouth first, and I thought he got off, and he did. I just re-hooked him down here. Sorry, dude. Well, not a bass, but still pretty cool catch. I wasn't expecting it at all. I am pretty sure, like I said, that I hooked him right there in the mouth. If you can see that right there. And then he got off, and then I must have snagged him when I pulled it again, but cool catch nonetheless. This is definitely not what I was trying to catch, but still glad to catch them because it's better than getting skunked. See you, buddy. Awesome. So it's actually 6 o'clock. It's dark out, and unfortunately after that crappie we didn't catch anything else. We didn't even get a bite, but I figured that would happen. It's been so tough here lately that even the techniques that I use usually in the winter, I didn't think they would work, but I wanted to give it a try, and at least we wasn't skunked, so you know, what can you do? Anyway, I hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you did, drop a like. Let me know if these are some techniques that you use during the winter, or if you have other techniques, drop them down in the comment section below and I'll be sure to try them out. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.